Hello everybody, welcome to episode 180 of Short Viewer. Today we'll be going over episode 12 of Daemons of the Shadow Realm. Now, this episode starts off with seeing Yuru is fletching some arrows for himself. And he's kind of discussing about how he learned how to do all this stuff and everything while in Higashi Village and everything. And then we see the Ken request to learn to use some weapons from Yuru. So then we end up swapping over to a perspective in the Kagemori headquarters where we see as Makoto is preparing to go on a mission with Jin. And we learn a little bit about Makoto's daemons, whose names are Akai and Midori. Akai being, I think it's a dog, and Midori being the tanuki. And she ends up revealing about how they actually kidnap stuff. So we see as Akai ends up acting as bait since he can turn into other people. And Midori ends up using the, let's just say, the endowment of tanuki, if you know if you know Japanese folklore, to capture them, as in like a blanket, essentially, by expanding them out. But yeah, so we see this, and then afterwards we end up swapping to a perspective of Asuma. We see as Asuma ultimately ends up going to meet this dude by the name of Shingo. Now Shingo is said to be his uncle, and we see as he goes in and speaks with Shingo, and we then learn that Shingo is kind of like a higher up for Asuma. Because he's talking with him all that, he's reporting in, telling him all the stuff that's happened at the Kagemori headquarters, telling him about how he sent people after Tadera and all of them, and how they ultimately did end up figuring out and all that. So we then see as Shingo obviously gets a little bit mad at this, and then Asuma then heads off, but tries to leave one of his little butterflies in there, but ultimately it is spotted out and killed by a henchman who appears to be the one that we saw at the end of the raid on the Kagemori headquarters, who Yuru was unable to shoot, like the dude with the swords and the black hair and ponytail. So I believe this is a recurring character. I might be misremembering, but I believe he was there when they attempted to kidnap the twins originally. But yeah, so then after this we see as Asuma ends up going and speaking with Jin. And we see as they're talking, and we see also as they discuss how both of actually Asuma reveals to Jin that in fact he did. Actually I forgot something. So when Shingo was when Shingo and Asuma were talking, Shingo suggested killing Hagure so that Asuma could come to the next head, and then he also suggested killing what's his dad's name? It's like Jongo or Gonzo. And he recommended killing Gonzo as well, but Asuma was like, that'd take too much effort. And then he was like, why don't you go and try and groom Asa to get on her side so she'll do it? And he's like, nah, that's illegal. So Asuma does have good morals. And Shingo's like, what are you, a square or something? So I guess Shingo does not have that good of morals. But yeah. So back to us seeing Jin and Asuma talking. We see as Asuma ends up revealing to Jin that in fact he did trail Tadera and them, and how he lost 2 of his people. But now they can use these names to essentially act as decoys, since they are still believed to be alive, and he's not going to mark them off in the record as dead. But yeah, so we see this, and then ultimately we see as Gabi ends up calling in to Jin, yo, hello. Well, actually, this happens after this interaction, but we see it as after this interaction, we go back to the perspective of everyone in Hana and Tadera's little apartment, where we see as they're all talking about the possibility of finding Yuru's grandparents, who have the last name of Kinjo. I think it's Kinjo. And we see as, in fact, they are obviously revealed to live in the Okinawa region, and they learned that Nagisa's last name was Kinjo just through looking through records and stuff like that. So now they are preparing to go and search for the Kinjo family to possibly learn more about where, Nagisa and Yuru and Asa's father may have went off to, because they were on their way back to Okinawa when they disappeared. But yeah, so then we end up going to the perspective of Gabi ended up calling Jin, and we see that Asa is in fact on the phone with her grandmother, the Kinjo grandmother, and we see they kind of have a normal kind of granddaughter conversation, but everyone ends up pulling up. We see as Jin's there, Gabi's there, and Asa is obviously on the phone. But then when she hangs up, she's like, yeah, it was the same as always. She repeated herself once more. They've done something to my grandmother. And then we see as we get the perspective of the grandmother, and what's causing her to repeat herself is a daemon. Someone has infiltrated her house and placed some daemon on her to keep her in this trance-like state. But yeah, so then after that we end up going back to the group, the Yuru group and all of that, where we see as ultimately they talk and they're like, yo, we probably don't need to go and find the Kinjos, because if we do, that could lead to undue attention being on them. Well, I guess unwanted attention being on them. And so ultimately, Tadera ends up going to, just kind of going on a little bit of a side quest, I guess, because it doesn't really have any, well, it did have some association, but not much association to the main plot of this episode. But we see as he ends up going off to this shaman by the name of Yama. And now Yama has association with Higashi Village. He's like the doctor for Higashi Village, or the shaman. He is the shaman for Higashi Village. And he goes and he speaks to them, he kind of updates them on everything that's happened, about how Yuru was able to escape Higashi Village, how the Kagemori is attacked, and we see all this stuff. And ultimately, they kind of get to yapping about all that. And then ultimately, Yama ends up revealing to Tadera that he was, in fact, ambushed on his way home one night. And in this ambush, he was attacked by a dude who had 2 katanas, which were likely Daemon themselves. And they attacked, well, this individual attacked Yama, but he didn't leave any wounds or anything like that, so Yama just presumed he was a pervert. But yeah, so after this, we see as ultimately the episode progresses, and obviously during this conversation, Tadera had brought up how there were some young kids who needed some vaccines and stuff like that. So ultimately, Yama's like, okay, I'll go up to Higashi Village and all that, just kind of help with the sick who've been wounded and everything, and also to give these vaccines. So we then see as Yama heads to go up onto Higashi Village, where he meets up with all the kids, and they kind of reveal all the stuff that's happened, and he's specifically there to heal one of the children whose mother is Azami. I don't know if Azami has been much of a prominent character before, because I don't really remember her name. But yeah, so we see as he ends up going, doing all this stuff, helping around, he ends up healing the kid and everything. And we then see as he then interacts with some of the characters, the adult characters within Higashi Village, and he's yapping with them, and they're like, yeah, crap, we let Yuru get away, and now we're kind of in big trouble. We should send some more people to try and kidnap him. And he's like, yo, you're not going to be able to kidnap Yuru. He is too powerful of an archer and all that, and he has the 2 Daemons. Well, he doesn't reveal that he has the 2 Daemons with him, but he knows this. But yeah, so we see as they speak about that, and ultimately something suddenly happens. We see as after they're talking about, well, actually Yama revealed that he had been trailed by someone on the way to Higashi Village, but ultimately he had lost them. And then we see as a sword spouts from his gun. We presume, Yama's dead. No, this is not the case. We see as ultimately this person ends up cutting out of him, cutting a square from Yama, then jumping out of that square. And it is the person who we saw with Shingo earlier in the episode, who was also probably at the Kagemori headquarters raid, attempting to kidnap Yuru and Asa, and was the one who Yama had presumed to be a pervert. Now this dude busts out of his gut, and he starts sliming. He has 2 katanas. He reveals his name to be Ivan, and he goes killing people in Higashi Village. And this doesn't end up killing Yama, because they just like cut like a, I guess, I don't even really know how to explain, like a mass of space out of Yama without like damaging him. And so he was kind of making a compartment within Yama, and jumped out, started killing people, and that's where the episode ends. So this was honestly a really great episode, because it showed us that Asuma is not the head, or he's not a sole dissident. He is in fact a part of a group that are kind of going against the Kagemori clan, and kind of the chaotic group. They're like a chaotic third party as compared to Higashi Village, the Kagemoris, and now this third party. And it's cool to see that this third party has some ability, because they were able to infiltrate Higashi Village, and they are probably going to have a pretty successful team. They have a very powerful Daemon wielder with Ivan. And we don't know anything about Shingo, at least power-wise, yet. And Asuma is obviously a very powerful Daemon wielder as well. So they have some pretty powerful, I guess, I was about to say compadres. They have some very powerful members of their group. So I'm really ready to see how they work. I'm ready to see what they do, what their goal is, and everything about it. But yeah, like I said, this episode was great. I loved it. It did great for story building. It did great for setting up multiple plot points that we can explore later on. So I cannot wait to see how this is, I guess, expounded upon within the next couple of episodes. Well, obviously, probably for the rest of the series, because it's just some pretty important plot points. But yeah, that's all there really was for episode 12 of Daemons of the Shadow Realm. That's all I really have for episode 180 of Shelf Review. So thank you very much for watching.